You're going to take care of your father-in-law for the rest of your life. I'm going to live with my new daughter-in-law, haha. One day, my mother-in-law suddenly dropped this on me. Basically, she was saying that my husband was having an affair, and she was backing it up. Furthermore, they planned to live at the mistress's house. At my in-laws' house, there was a wheelchair-bound father-in-law who needed care. Despite this, my husband and his mother went to the mistress's house. What they did was, of course, unforgivable. However, I couldn't just leave my father-in-law behind and leave. As I wavered, my father-in-law finally stood up. My name is Linda, 30 years old. I married my husband Bob, and it's almost our 3rd year. At first, we got along so well, but now we don't talk as much. Is this what they call getting used to? The more you know each other, the more your love stabilizes, and you end up seeking a more stable life. There was no problem with our marital life, but it could be described as unstimulating. Plus, about a year ago, my husband's job got busy, and he started to work overtime. Business trips, which were almost non-existent before, have become a few times a month. However, he always covers the living expenses, and I have a job too. I can't always worry about him. Sometimes when he comes home early, we have dinner together and make up for the lost time. From the outside, it may look like our marriage is cooling down, but that's not the case. This is the shape of our marriage. This unchanging married life was our norm. Then, one day, when I finished work and came home, my husband was already there. Usually, he doesn't come home until after 10 p.m., but it was still 7 p.m. "Welcome back." To his greeting, I asked back, "Bob, you came home early today. Didn't you have to work overtime?" "That's not the point. My father had an accident and is in the hospital." "Wait, your father?" According to my husband, his father had an accident on his way to work at his own company when a car ignoring the red light crashed into him. Fortunately, he didn't have any fatal injuries, but he was left with paralysis in both legs and one arm, forcing him into a wheelchair-bound life. My father-in-law had an accident? You've got to be kidding. My father-in-law, who loved hiking and fishing, is now wheelchair-bound? That's too pitiful. My father-in-law was an outdoor enthusiast, and he often took my husband and me to various places. He treated me like his own daughter and always said, "If you ever have any problems, feel free to rely on me." Such a father-in-law had an accident? It was hard to believe. My father-in-law was running his own company, but my husband works for a different company. So we weren't immediately notified about his accident. We only found out when my mother-in-law contacted us. In this day and age, we couldn't visit him as often as we wanted, which was frustrating. My husband Bob started the conversation with a serious look in his eyes. "Well, Linda, Mom asked me to do something about Dad." "What did your mom ask for?" "Well, she was wondering if we could help take care of Dad." "Take care of your father?" "Yeah, Mom's been getting on in years, right? So she's finding it difficult to do it all by herself. She wants us to help out." "So that means we'd have to move to your parents' house?" "That's right. There's plenty of room at their house, and we'll have enough space. What do you think?" I fell silent. I admire my father-in-law and care about him a lot, but I can't just say, "Oh, sure, no problem," and readily agree to a thing that I've never done before. It's not that I don't care about your father, but I have a job too. Suddenly, asked to provide care, what should I do? I racked my brain trying to come up with the best solution. But no matter how much I thought about it, no good ideas came to mind. Perhaps sensing my state, Bob took my hand and stared at me straight. "Linda, I need you. I know it's going to be tough since it's your first time. But if we leave it all to Mom, I'm worried she might break down too." "Well, I think it will be tough. But I have a job too." "Linda, you can quit your job. I'll earn our living expenses, so can you dedicate yourself to taking care of Mom and Dad?" Quit my job? "Yes, I'll earn the money and support you. That's why I need you. Our family needs you. Bob pleading on his knees repeatedly. Eventually, I decided to quit my job and dedicate myself to taking care of my father-in-law, just as Bob had said. A few days after we started living together, Bob suddenly said, "I'll take over my father's company and become the president." Even my father-in-law was surprised by this, but perhaps he was secretly happy that his son would take over his company. Tears welling up in his eyes, my father-in-law said to Bob, "Bob, I can't believe you said that. After all this time of you saying, I won't work at your company." Well, that was, how do I say it, like playing hard to get? With you in this condition, Dad, I can't just leave the company alone, right? Thank you. I was wondering what to do with the company. I thought I'd leave it to someone who I can trust, but if you're willing to take it over, I'd like to pass it on. I knew you'd agree, Dad. I'll do my best as your son. Yes, I'm counting on you. For the sake of the employees who followed me, please create a good working environment. Of course. So, Bob took over his father's company, and my father-in-law moved from the president to the chairman. Usually the chairman has various responsibilities. However, my father-in-law decided to leave the company's operations entirely to Bob, retaining only his title. 2 months had passed since Bob took over after my father-in-law. Every day he returns home past midnight. At first I thought he was just busy with unfamiliar work and kept working overtime, but every night of overtime work is surely too much. What further aroused my suspicion was my husband's peculiar scent. That day I was unable to fall asleep, and as the late night hours rolled by, I was still wide awake. When I got up to drink a glass of water from the kitchen, I heard the front door open. I quickly moved towards the entrance, and the moment I greeted him with "Welcome home," I smelled the scent of soap coming from my husband. Upon seeing me, my husband opened his mouth with a surprised look. Why are you up at this hour? I couldn't sleep. Bob, you've been coming home late as usual. Well, I can't help it, can I? I've taken over my dad's business, and there's a lot I don't know. I see. You must be having a hard time. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. As he tried to leave, I smelled the scent of soap again. On the spur of the moment, I grabbed his arm and interrogated him with a stern tone. Bob, who do you usually work overtime with? What? Why the sudden question? No, it's just, I noticed a nice scent coming from you. Why the hell should I know that? I'm working my ass off. Don't ask me about such petty things. His facial expression was more irritated than ever. His attitude only served to amplify my suspicions. As I struggled with how to press him further, Bob let out a sigh. Seriously, can you stop with that? I come home tired, and you interrogate me as soon as I get back. That's not a pleasant welcome. I didn't mean to. I was just curious. So you're doubting me. We're living comfortably because I work like this every day. Do you get that? I understand that. Damn it. If you have some time to talk about this crap, why don't you do some cleaning? I don't have time for this. With that, he stormed off upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room. When I peeked into the bedroom, he was ignoring me and messing around on his smartphone. Despite my attempts to apologize, he ignored me completely. The next day, my mother-in-law confronted me with a demonic expression. Linda, I heard you suspected Bob of cheating yesterday. I didn't suspect him. I just asked who he was working overtime with. That's suspicious enough. You're able to live because Bob is working hard. Do you realize that? I do, and I'm grateful. All I did was voice a concern I had. That's what I'm telling you is rude. What are you trying to achieve by making Bob uncomfortable? You're the worst as a wife. After screaming at me, she dumped all the housework on me and stormed out. My mother-in-law has never really liked me. In front of my husband and father-in-law, she pretends to share the housework, but in reality, I'm the one doing all the chores in this house. And, of course, I'm also the one taking care of my father-in-law. My mother-in-law often finds excuses to go out, returning only in the evening. My father-in-law, who basically stays in his room, is not aware of how often she leaves during the day. Sometimes people from the company come to visit him, but other than that, he hardly ever leaves his room. Moreover, I've been warned by my mother-in-law not to tell my father-in-law and Bob anything unnecessary. I had no choice but to silently do the housework and caregiving. What made it bearable was the presence of my father-in-law. Every time I did something, he would thank me with a sorry look on his face. "Linda, I'm sorry. You must hate taking care of an old man like me, right?" "That's not the case at all. I think of you, my father-in-law, as my own father. It's an honor to be a help to you." "Having you say such things, it makes me feel lucky. I'm really glad that a person like you married Bob." "Oh my, likewise. I'm glad to have a kind person like you as my father-in-law. There are many days when the actions and words of my husband and mother-in-law are hurtful. In the midst of this, the existence of my father-in-law, who needs me, has barely kept me going. It's my role to wipe down my father-in-law before he goes to sleep, and turn off the lights. When I finish everything and return to the living room today, my husband, who usually shouldn't be here at this time, showed up with my mother-in-law. My husband had a nasty grin on his face. Perhaps he had been talking to my mother-in-law. I have a bad feeling. The next moment I thought so, unbelievable words were released from my mother-in-law's mouth. "Oh, good timing! I have something to tell you." "Something to talk about?" "I'll cut to the chase, okay? You should take care of your father here for the rest of your life." "Mother-in-law? What are you talking about?" "I've decided to live with a new daughter-in-law. Of course, Bob will be with me too." "A new daughter-in-law?" I unintentionally lost my words at the shock. I realized I was frozen on the spot. A new daughter-in-law? What on earth is she talking about? Why doesn't Bob say anything? As if to ridicule my silence, my husband shoved a divorce paper in front of me. "I have a girlfriend. My mom and I have decided to live at her place." What? "I'm going to pack up now and leave with my mom. Whether or not you submit the divorce papers is up to you. But either way, it's your job to take care of Dad." "No way!" I felt hopeless, and I collapsed to my knees on the spot. My husband and mother-in-law started packing their things, leaving me behind. Tears start to spill in the silent living room. Then my father-in-law in his wheelchair appeared. "Linda, it's quite noisy. What happened to Bob and his mother?" "Father-in-law." "Hey, why are you crying? What exactly happened?" I conveyed the conversation I had earlier to my father-in-law. His expression became increasingly stiff, and by the time I finished telling him, his eyes had changed. He stood up briskly and announced with an unprecedented strength, "Linda, it's time for a counterattack." "Huh? Your legs!" "Sorry for keeping silent. The truth is, I've been able to walk for a while now. It's okay, leave everything to me. The preparation is already in place." My father-in-law pulled a large brown envelope from the drawer and showed me its contents. "Father-in-law, this is—" What was inside were various pieces of evidence of my husband's infidelity, and, unbelievably, evidence of my mother-in-law's infidelity as well. According to him, since Bob became the president, my father-in-law had trustworthy employees monitor his actions at the company. As a result, it was found out that my husband leaves work precisely on time every day. Despite everything, I found him coming home after midnight every night. My father-in-law then commissioned a private detective to investigate my husband. He seemed to have noticed that his wife was out during the day, and he asked them to investigate her as well. As a result, both of their affairs came to light. The woman my husband was cheating with was also known to his mother, and it was found that they had met together. These pieces of evidence were obtained just recently. He seemed to be struggling with when to tell me the truth. "It's blunt, but I'm glad I could talk." "Linda, what do you want to do?" I want to get back at those two." "I see. Leave the rest to me." My father-in-law then made a call to someone on his smartphone. It seems to be someone from his company, and my husband was subsequently demoted from his CEO position. I submitted the divorce papers as my father-in-law had told me. Using the evidence of the affair, I asked for compensation from Bob and his lover through a lawyer. A week later, Bob came to visit his parents' house. presumably because a certified mail had arrived. In front of me and my father-in-law, he yelled back defensively, "Hey, Dad, what's going on? Just because I cheated, there's no need to fire me from the CEO position." "Shut up. You didn't help me with my cure, and you hurt Linda. It's a million years too early for a scumbag like you to be in a leadership position." "What? I'm cutting ties with you. Never come back to this house again." But... Bob fell to his knees in tears. He clung to me in disdain, pleading desperately. Linda, please. I don't mind if you retract the divorce, So? Please convince Dad. I'll break up with my lover, so please drop the compensation claim. Even now, this guy is only thinking about saving himself. I was utterly disillusioned with him. To release all my pent-up frustration, I spoke boldly. "What are you talking about now? Retract the divorce? I didn't ask for that. You know what? I feel great to be able to divorce a scumbag like you. There's no way I'll ever go back to being your wife." "Do you mean you've already... the divorce papers?" "Of course! Why should I willingly stay married to a terrible person like you? Being divorced and being fired as CEO, it's all your own fault. It's the seed you sowed." "But those divorce papers, I only used them as a thread." "I thought so. I hope you, your mother, and your lover all go to hell. You need to give up on the idea of getting help from someone else." With a dismissive gesture, I threw him out the front door. From outside, Bob's pleading cries could be heard. "Help me! I was wrong. I won't cheat again, so please forgive me. Linda, Dad, please, don't abandon me." Neither my father-in-law nor I ever responded to those cries again. Later, my ex-husband and mother-in-law were sued for alimony and subsequently evicted from their mistress's home. Due to their swift breakup, they found themselves homeless, reportedly forced to live in a comic book cafe for a while. Bob paid me alimony, and his mother paid my father-in-law, depleting their savings and leading them to accumulate debt. Homeless and without food, they are now forced to live a life of poverty, working day jobs. On the other hand, I continue to take care of my father-in-law at his home, despite the divorce. My father-in-law kindly told me, "You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like." Relying on his kindness, I decided to live in my in-laws' home. Recently, as my father-in-law has started going to a daycare service during the daytime, I've started working during those hours. There will be various challenges in the future, but no matter what happens, I want to do as much as I can for my father-in-law.